Hi, third graders. Welcome back. We're going to start actually chapter 7, but we're getting near the end, right, of this Gasping garbage book. And before we started, I wanted to show you Doyle and Fossey Science Detectives is a series of books that you can purchase. I got all of mine on Amazon, but I think there are some at Barnes & Noble. And I wanted to show you a few of the ones I have in my library. And maybe if you like this story, right, and you like science and you like mysteries and solving problems, you might be able to maybe put this on your Christmas list. Okay, there are 6 total. I only have 3 other ones. But this is the case of the Mossy Lake Monster. And remember, they're all broken up into 2 chapter stories. So you don't just get one story. You probably get 4 or so in here. And you haven't seen, but at the end of the books, there's all kinds of science experiments and things to do in these books. So that's a fun little extra that comes. So that is number 2, I believe. Number 3 is called The Case of the Graveyard Ghost. And then I don't have number 4, but I do have number 5, The Case of the Crooked Carnival. I like carnivals, so I think I would like this one. This is number 5. So I'm missing 4 and 6 that I think I'm going to have to put on my Christmas list so that I can add to my collection. But let's start out. We're going to start on chapter 7. Before we do, I want you to be thinking about this question. What scientific breakthrough is Drake about to discover as the chapter begins? So as we start this chapter, be thinking, what breakthrough is he trying to discover? Okay, let's look at this chapter. Chapter 7 is called A Teeny Tiny Case. And I hope you know that authors quite often use the title in the story to kind of help us identify some things. We're going to talk today a little bit about point of view. Okay? And point of view is how someone sees something that's happening in a story. Like you might be on the playground and you might have a version of what happened, and somebody else in your class might have a different version of what happened. So everyone has a different point of view, and they bring all their life experience to that. So let's read chapter 7, A Teeny Tiny Case. Business was slow. Doyle and Fossey, science detectives, hadn't had a case in a week. Not even a phone call. The word on the streets was that Frisco was slashing his prices. No interest, no payments till next year. But that was just a rumor. If truth be known, Frisco was grounded. No phone calls, no TV, no computer, and above all, no science for a week, screamed his mother. Not until you stop testing your hypotheses on your little sister. Rumor or no rumor, Drake didn't let slow business keep him from science. And on this particularly pleasant afternoon, he was smack dab in the middle of a scientific breakthrough. Ooh, let's see if you can figure out what that is. The solution in the beaker churned and bubbled, smelling like stinky cheese on a summer's day. Pew. Remember, solution. Remember, that's a mixture of something. The phone rang. Drake put his experiment aside. Business was business. It paid the bills. Breakthroughs would have to wait. Besides, he was feeling a mite queasy from the smell of stinky cheese. I wonder what scientific breakthrough he's trying to discover. Doyle and Fossey. Nothing. Doyle and Fossey, Drake said again. Finally, after what seemed like ages, a tiny voice spoke. Look at that font. Drake? Speaking. Who is this? It's Lily. Lily Crump. How tiny the words are. Lily Crump was the tiniest girl in the 5th grade. Even her voice was tiny, more like a squeak. Oh, hi, Lily, Drake said as he pushed up his glasses. He does that a lot. Now, speak up. What seems to be the problem? No problem, really. You see, I've just received an anonymous love letter, and it's my very first love letter ever. I need you to help me find out who it's from. I'm desperate. Normally, Drake didn't take cases that involved love. After all, he couldn't measure love. He couldn't even put it in a test tube. But business was business. It paid the bills. Check, he said. I'll be right there. Click. Drake phoned Nell. My breakthrough on how to take the stink out of cheese will have to wait. He's trying to figure out how to take the smelliness out of cheese. Meet me at Lily's house right away, scientist Nell. We've got a desperate case to solve, and we're desperate. Right. Click. At Lily's house, Drake and Nell examined the letter. They held it up to the light. They sniffed it. They peered at it through their magnifying glasses. Peered is a really good word for looking at something. See if you notice some things. Dear Lily, you are pretty. I like the way you comb your hair. You got nice front teeth. Love, your secret admirer. P.S. It's okay that your voice squeaks. Charming, said Nell. Astounding, said Drake. Naturally, you would want to know who sent this to you, added Nell. Where did you find it? I love how Nell and Drake ask lots of good questions. I found it in my desk after I came in from recess today, said Lily. Drake pushed up his glasses. There he goes again. I had a similar case once. I know just what to do. First, Nell and I will need to return to the lab. I'm afraid we'll have to take the letter. Evidence, said Nell. Lily nodded. I understand. Scientist Nell and I must conduct further analysis. Expect our report within 24 hours, Drake said as he rushed out the door. Back in the lab, Drake pulled a book off the shelf. He flipped through the pages until he found the right chapter. Anonymous letter detection. What to do when your love life is sinking fast. After they finished reading the chapter, Drake and Nell looked at each other. They read some information. They're doing a lot of research. Looks like we'll need to go into action, said Drake. Check, answered Nell. Tomorrow at school, we'll gather more evidence. The next day, Drake and Nell sat on the grass during recess. Between them lay a mound of assorted pens, each one carefully labeled. How did it go? Asked Nell. Did you have any problems getting pens from everyone? Only from Baloney, answered Drake. He pushed up his glasses. When I asked to borrow his favorite pen, Baloney sat on me and threatened to squeeze my eyes out. Fortunately, when he left, his pen was lying on the floor beside me. Wow, whispered Nell, the dangers of science. Here's a picture. Right, here's some kids watching. Here's poor Drake on the floor. He's got his science notebook. Ooh, there's a pen right there. So this must be Baloney. Baloney was the biggest kid in the 5th grade. Even his elbows were big. His real name was Bubba Mahoney, but everyone called him Baloney. Usually Drake used his good scientific sense and stayed away from Baloney, but business was business. Drake knew that a good scientist must put away his emotions and stick to his goal, even if it means being sat on. Now, said Drake, it's obvious to me that since the letter was written in black ballpoint ink, we can immediately remove all the pens that aren't black. How many does that leave us? A moment, please. Nell tested the pens on a piece of scrap paper. Out of the original 28 pens, we are left with 19. 9 down, 19 to go. Affirmative. That means yes, that's correct. Once school was out, Drake and Nell rushed to the laboratory. They seem excited, don't they? All afternoon they worked. They cut long strips of paper. They labeled each strip. Elliot Zelder, Nell wrote across the top of one strip, using the pen labeled Elliot Zelder. On the bottom of the same strip, she drew a heavy dot. Baloney, wrote Drake on another strip with Bubba Mahoney's pen. James Frisco, Nell wrote with Frisco's pen, and so on. When all the strips were labeled, They hung the bottom of each strip in separate beakers of alcohol. Remember, beakers are kind of like test tubes, kind of like what flowers might go in, like a flower vase. Finally, they cut a strip from the love letter. At the bottom of the love letter strip was the heart, drawn in black ink. They suspended the end in another beaker of alcohol. Suspended means to hang it. And then they waited and waited and waited. Hot chocolate? Asked Mrs. Doyle as she peeked into the lab. No thanks, said Drake, just muffins. Coffee, decaf, black, said Nell. Affirmative, replied Mrs. Doyle. And soon she returned with muffins and a steaming cup of coffee. Nell's my kind of gal. Then, as Drake and Nell watched, rainbows of colors slowly crept up the strips of paper. Excuse me. Purples, reds, golds, pinks, and blues. It was really quite lovely. Finally, Drake and Nell compared the different strips to the strip cut from Lily's love letter. Analysis complete, said Drake. Out of the 19 strips we tested, only 2 matched the ink in the love letter. Nell scratched her head, obviously thinking hard. One of the matching strips belongs to the spelling bee champion, and the love letter was filled with errors, so it couldn't possibly be him, which means that Drake and Nell gasped with surprise as they read the name on the last matching strip. We've found our man, they said together. So they, remember, were looking back at the spelling. That was a good observation. I told you to pay attention to that, right? I can see lots of misspelled words. This looks like lick, but it's like, and I know that would have that magic E on the end to make that I say its name, right? Your, not your hair. And that kind of hair is like a rabbit, not the hair on your head. So lots of misspelled words in here, but they think they know, right, who sent that love letter. So hopefully you were able to figure out, right, that scientific breakthrough. Drake is trying to take the stink out of cheese. Wouldn't that be fabulous? Thinking about point of view, right? Whose point of view this chapter is told. So thinking about that, there's a narrator, right, talking a lot about after they finished reading the chapter. So they being Nell and Drake. They didn't say after I finished or after we finished. So somebody is telling the story, right? The narrator. But whose point of view? Who's the person that's mostly doing things in this chapter? Right? I think it's Drake. They talk a lot about, besides, he was feeling a mite queasy, right? From the smell of stinky cheese, right? That's the part right there. So this really is from Drake's perspective. He's the one that's sort of telling this part of the story. I want to point this out. Do you see these parentheses right here? Okay, sometimes I call those hugs. When I read this passage, think about that. How do these parentheses kind of affect this? Right? They said business was slow. They didn't have a phone call. And then in parentheses, the word on the streets was that Frisco was slashing its prices. No interest, no payments till next year, but that was just a rumor. Truth be known, Frisco was grounded. No phone calls, no TV, no computer, and above all, no science for a week, screamed his mother. Not until you stop testing your hypotheses on your little sister. So what do you think is happening? The narrator's telling us something, right? It almost feels like this is maybe someone whispering, right? The word on the street, right? So they're kind of telling us something in secret. So good writers add different things into their story like that. I love how when Lily talks, the font, the size is really tiny. Why is it so tiny? Because we learned that Lily is the tiniest girl in the 5th grade, right? And she's got a little squeaky voice. So when she speaks, right, it's really tiny, almost like a mouse. So today you're going to watch a video on what point of view is, and then you're going to have an activity to work on. And in that activity, you're going to make a tic-tac-toe on this paper. And you're going to pick one sentence from each column. You'll see it when it'll make sense when you see it. And you're going to be writing 3 different sentences. Okay. After you watch the video, you'll understand that sentences can be written in first person, right? We're writing our personal narrative in first person. So you should know what that means. I, me, my. Second person and third person. So watch that Cram Jam video if you haven't already, right? To learn a little bit more about point of view. And then remember, when you do your activity, be sure that you save it and turn it in. And remember also to mark the videos that you watch, mark those on Google Classroom that you have done them, right? At the bottom, you can click on the little mountain and it will say mark as done. So make sure you do that.